This is not Christy that I know. It's just not.
Deputies say both 22-year-old Taylor Sheets and 17-year-old Madison Sheets were shot by their mother, 42-year-old Christy Sheets.
A mother killing her own children. Now that's something we don't come across often in true crime. But when it does happen, you know it's not your average story. Unfortunately, today's case is no exception. It's a tale so twisted and haunting that even 8 years later, it still leaves media outlets, the public, and investigators stunned. So once again, we're going to dissect every detail of the case and uncover why Christy Sheets did what she did. For starters, let's take a closer look at the woman at the heart of this case, Christy Sheets. On the surface, especially through her social media, Christy appeared to be the picture of a loving, caring, and proud mother. She was very open about her love for her daughters, often sharing photos and stories on Facebook about how much joy being a mom brought her. But there's more to her story than what you see on social media. At 2016, Christy was 42 years old, and her husband, Jason Sheets, was 44. The couple had been married for more than 20 years. Originally from Decatur, Alabama, they had moved to Fools Here, Texas, around 2002, settling into a beautiful brick house on Remsen Hollow Lane in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Together, they had 2 daughters, Taylor, who was 22, and Madison, who was 17. Taylor, the older of the two, was a young woman with a bright future ahead of her. In 2016, she had just graduated with honors from Lone Star College and worked full-time at a daycare facility in Katy, Texas, called Kids Are Kids. Taylor was also a talented artist, known for her sense of humor, her independent spirit, and her plans to marry her high school sweetheart, Juan. The couple had been engaged for 4 years and were set to marry on June 27th. Madison, Christy's younger daughter, was about to enter her senior year at Seven Lakes High School. Her friends and family remember her as a sweet, innocent girl with a big heart. Madison was passionate about cooking and loved to be around children. Much like her older sister, she had a contagious sense of humor and was loved by everyone who knew her. For the past 3 years, Madison had worked part-time as a babysitter and even dog-sat for her neighbors. Jason Sheets, Christy's husband, was the hard-working provider of the family. He worked as an IT consultant for an oil and gas company in Houston and, on top of that, tutored students in his spare time to make sure his family had everything they needed. Neighbors remember Jason as a friendly, outgoing person who was always willing to lend a hand and chat when he was outside. However, Christy wasn't known for being friendly or social. While Jason and the girls would often wave and speak to the neighbors, Christy was more distant, preferring to stay out of neighborhood gatherings and social interactions. This made her come across as cold and standoffish to many people in the neighborhood. What stood out about this case was the 2 very different opinions people had of Christy. Many from her past remembered her as a proud and loving mother. They recalled how she loved talking about her daughters, often pulling out her phone to show pictures and brag about their accomplishments. She seemed to find immense joy in being a mother and took pride in her family. However, there was another side to Christy that some people mentioned. They described her as emotionally distant and somewhat unpredictable. It became clear that while some saw her as a devoted mom, others saw a more complex and perhaps troubled individual. Understanding Christy Sheets, her background, her mindset, and the events leading up to the tragedy is key to understanding the actions that led to the horrific events of that day. By going back into her life and examining every detail, we can better understand why Christy did what she did. Growing up in Alabama, Christy was raised by her grandfather, who was like a father to her. You could see from her posts in 2012 that she had a deep admiration for him. She described him as the person who gave her the love and attention she craved, someone she turned to for everything. From her words, it was clear that he was the center of her world, and the love she felt for him was immense. But Christie's relationships, in general, seemed to lack depth. She didn't have many people she could rely on besides her grandfather. In May of 2012, Christie visited her grandpa in Decatur, Alabama for his 82nd birthday. She posted about how thankful she was to her husband Jason for allowing her to be there. She also expressed guilt about being in Texas while her grandfather was so ill in Alabama. Then, exactly 1 month later, on June 8, 2012, Christie's world came crashing down when her beloved grandfather passed away. Her social media posts during this time reflected her devastation. There were constant updates about how much pain she was in and how she couldn't stop crying. She marked the days since his death and even had a post in November of 2012 where she admitted that she couldn't gather the strength to go into a grocery store because the grief was overwhelming. Just 2 months after her grandfather's death, Christie's mother passed away as well. But interestingly, her mother's death didn't seem to affect her as deeply. She posted once about how sad it was that her mother passed away so young, but then quickly went back to posting about her grief over her grandfather. By the way, I post true crime and new cases here every day. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot. Jason, Christie's husband, later shared in an interview that after her grandfather's passing, the woman he married was gone. According to him, Christie sank into a deep depression and her drinking became excessive. This started to take a toll on their marriage, which began to unravel. The once strong bond they shared began to crumble under the weight of her mental health struggles, alcoholism, and the grief she was unable to cope with. As Christie's downward spiral continued, the Fort Bend Sheriff's Office was called to the Sheets family home a total of 14 times since January of 2012. 3 of these calls were for emotional distress, where Christie had threatened to commit self-harm. On each occasion, Christie was taken to a private medical facility and held for several days, but once she claimed everything was fine, she was released and sent back home. According to Jason, this cycle would repeat itself time and time again. By this point, Christie and Jason's marriage was hanging by a thread. They would separate, Christie would move into an apartment, and then they would reconcile, creating an unstable and volatile situation. In 2014, during one of the couple's many separations, Christie discovered the world of selfies. Prior to this, her posts had a mix of family pictures, but after 2014, it was nearly all selfies. Now, there's no doubt that Christie was a stunningly beautiful woman who appeared to be even more striking in her 40s than in her 20s. However, instead of simply embracing her beauty, it became clear that she was searching for validation. The comments on her selfies revealed that she was seeking approval and trying to fill a void. It seemed like the more she posted, the more desperate she became for attention and affirmation. According to Jason, Christie struggled with low self-esteem and harbored deep self-hatred, which negatively affected her relationships with him and with their daughters. Additionally, Christie would often make passive-aggressive comments to their daughter Madison, like telling her, "When I was your age, I was this size." She would even try on Madison's clothes and make references to her size, undermining her daughter in subtle yet damaging ways. These little comments weren't just occasional. They seemed to be a part of Christie's ongoing struggle with her own insecurities. It's also important to note that, based on Christie's Facebook posts, she was a vocal advocate for gun rights in the United States. In one post, she expressed her strong beliefs about the Second Amendment, emphasizing her support for the right to bear arms. Fast forward to 2014, Christie got a job as a receptionist at a tattoo removal company owned by John Hollis. However, John described Christie's behavior as erratic. There were many times when she simply wouldn't show up to work and wouldn't even bother to call in. Christie told John that she was in the process of a divorce and living in an apartment separate from her family. John eventually looked up Christie's LinkedIn profile and noticed she was misrepresenting herself. She had listed herself as the business manager of the company when she was actually just a receptionist, and she claimed to have been working there for 2 years when, in reality, she had only been there for 5 months. John confronted Christy about the misinformation and asked her repeatedly to fix it, but she never did. 5 months after starting with the company, John ended up terminating her employment. Interestingly, he said that Christy took the news surprisingly well and that the termination was amicable. By June of 2016, Jason and Christy had reconciled from yet another separation, but things were already starting to fall apart again. According to Jason, Christy was taking multiple medications for her mental health struggles and was seeing a therapist once a month. Additionally, Christy and Taylor, the older daughter, had been fighting constantly about Taylor's upcoming wedding to her fiancé, Juan. Then, on Friday, June 24th, which also happened to be Jason's 45th birthday, things took a darker turn. From the moment Christy woke up, she was at odds with everyone, Madison, Taylor, and Jason. The atmosphere in the house was filled with negativity, and Jason eventually reached his breaking point. Jason, after a long day of arguing, told Christy he wanted a divorce. He bluntly told her, "This will be the last birthday you're going to ruin." Christy, who had been pushing for a divorce for months, saw this as the final straw. But the situation didn't end there. Christy demanded that Jason ground Taylor from seeing her fiancé, Juan. Jason, however, argued that it was ridiculous. Taylor was 22 years old, an adult. He refused to control his daughter like that, which only made Christy angrier. Their relationship had been hanging by a thread for so long, and now it seemed like everything was falling apart. Madison, who was close to both her sister and mother, was feeling the tension as well. She spoke with a high school friend around 9 o'clock that Friday morning, and her friend noticed that Madison was acting strange, anxious and distant, and unwilling to share many details. Madison only said that she and her mom had been arguing, but nothing more. It was clear something wasn't right, and the day was about to get much worse. Around 5 o'clock in the evening, Christy, in a fit of rage, called a family meeting. She demanded that Jason, Taylor, and Madison sit down and talk. Jason thought Christy was going to address the divorce with the girls, but instead, she dropped a bombshell. Christy demanded an apology from Jason, but he refused. That's when Christy completely lost it. In an outburst of fury, she reached under the couch cushions and pulled out a .38 caliber shotgun, one that her grandfather had left her to protect the family. The room fell into silence. Jason and the girls froze, unsure of what was happening. In a desperate attempt to protect his daughters, Jason screamed, begging Christy not to shoot them. He even pleaded with her, saying, "Don't do this. There are kids." But his words fell on deaf ears. He then said, "Just shoot yourself. Make it easy on all of us. Just shoot yourself." Christy, however, coldly replied, "No, that's not what this is about. This is about punishing you." Naturally horrified, Jason tried to bargain with her, promising he would do whatever she wanted if it would stop the madness. But Christy wasn't hearing it. "No, stop talking," she snapped. "It's too late." Somehow, amidst the chaos, they managed to call 911 not once, but twice. But what's truly heart-wrenching is that in the calls, all you can hear are their terrified screams and desperate pleas, begging their mom not to pull the trigger. With that, she turned the gun on Madison and shot her in the neck, then turned to Taylor and shot her in the back. The terror that followed was unimaginable. Jason somehow managed to get around the couch and helped his daughters escape through the front door. But Christy wasn't done. She fired 3 more shots, missing the girls but hitting the wall. Madison made it out to the street but collapsed from her injuries almost immediately, dying right there on the pavement. Christy followed Taylor out into the street, and as Taylor collapsed too, Jason ran to a neighbor's house, frantic and desperate, begging them to call 911.
She's going inside the house now. Hopefully he's not getting any more bullets because she looks like she's going to look for more bullets.
Okay. All right, stay on the line.
She's coming back again. Apparently she has bullets now.
Okay, stay on the line.
Oh, he shot her again. She shot her
You
again.
shot her again?
Yes. From the back. She was trying to run.
As you've just heard, not long after Christy had reloaded and returned outside, despite her critical injuries, Taylor managed to get up and attempted to flee. It appeared as though Christy was preparing to shoot Madison again, even though Madison had already died. At that moment, officers ordered Christy to drop the gun, but she failed to comply, and instead, she moved toward the officers. One officer fired, hitting Christy with a single shot to the chest, ending the threat. Taylor was rushed to a nearby hospital by life flight, but she was in critical condition and died shortly afterward. Jason, physically unharmed but deeply traumatized, was taken to the hospital due to the shock he was experiencing. He had witnessed the horrifying deaths of his daughters at the hands of the woman he once loved. His mental and emotional state was shattered, and the entire community, along with family and friends, struggled to comprehend the depth of the tragedy. The details were coming to light, and it left many stunned. The shocking events took place in Fullshear, Texas, where the Sheets family lived. Neighbors were trying to make sense of it all, and they demanded answers. What could have led a mother to kill her own daughters? That's the question everyone wanted answered. Maternal filicide, the act of a mother killing her own children, is rare but devastating. It's considered one of the most challenging forms of homicide to prevent, as it often comes with little to no warning. In this case, the signs were subtle but present, and the aftermath left everyone, from friends and family to the community at large, grappling with the incomprehensible loss of two bright lives. As previously mentioned, Christy's actions seemed to stem from a deep desire for vengeance against her husband, Jason. What made this tragedy even more chilling was that Christy had the opportunity to harm Jason while they were inside the house, but she chose not to. Instead, she targeted their daughters, Taylor and Madison, as a way to inflict the ultimate emotional pain on him. Jason later gave an emotional interview with Dr. Oz, where he opened up about the overwhelming grief he was struggling to cope with. The raw pain in his words was palpable, as he shared how his faith had become his anchor in the midst of such unspeakable loss. When asked about his daughters, Jason described them as lights of joy in a world full of darkness. He spoke of how they had pure love and joy in their hearts, always extending kindness to people of all backgrounds, races, and religions. Their vibrant spirits and bright futures were tragically snuffed out far too soon. In the interview, Jason also shared the deep void left in his life, especially when he recalled how his daughters used to encourage him during his runs. "When I can't get another breath, I think of them, and it pushes me to run a little faster," he said, finding solace in their memory as he carried on with his life, even without them by his side. Juan, Taylor's fiancé, was also interviewed by Dr. Oz, and his words were equally heartbreaking. "There's really no words to describe the hell I go through every day knowing I won't get that good morning text from her," he said. He shared the pain of losing the woman he was ready to marry and how he could never have picked a better person for his daughter than Juan. But the devastation didn't end with the family. The police officer involved in the tragic shooting of Christy Sheets was also deeply affected by the events. Fort Bend County Sheriff Troy Niels weighed in on the situation, reiterating that the officer acted appropriately given the danger Christy posed at the time. Despite the necessity of the officer's actions to protect others, Niels emphasized the emotional toll it had on him. "There isn't an officer that wakes up any morning and says, 'I want to go out and legally kill somebody,'" Niels told People magazine. He added that the officer's struggle to come to terms with taking a life was real and profound, highlighting the emotional and mental impact of such incidents on those who are sworn to protect and serve. Taylor and Madison Sheets were laid to rest on July 2, 2016, at Limestone Memorial Gardens in Athens, Alabama. Their father, Jason, chose not to claim Christy's body, leaving it to her family to handle the arrangements. Reports suggest she had a private service in Alabama and was cremated afterward. After everything that went down, Jason packed up and moved back to Decatur, Alabama. Within a year, he remarried, trying to piece his life back together after such a devastating loss. But let's talk about what's really on everyone's mind. What do you think pushed Christy to commit such a horrifying act against her own daughters? Was it her mental health struggles, years of bottled up emotions, or something else entirely? And why do you think she didn't harm Jason, even though it seemed like he was the one she wanted to hurt most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you like the way we create these videos, and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.